You're totally right, Julie. We usually talk about IPOs. The challenge is companies are staying private longer and longer. So you have fewer IPOs. The number of publicly listed companies continues to be at an all-time low. And so if you're an investor that's only investing in public stocks, you're missing out on where a lot of more value creation could be occurring, which is just, in other slices of the portfolio. And so where EquityZen and Morgan Stanley came together is really several years ago. For the last couple of years, we've been trying to figure out a way to work together. Now, look, Morgan Stanley is a world-class organization, but it's a real pioneer in the private market space. They, acquired Solium ShareWorks, and they have the Morgan Stanley at Work program. And by doing that, they've been servicing private companies for a very long time. The piece that's been missing is the piece that connects all of that supply to the demand side, which requires technology, and it requires an issuer-friendly platform, which is essentially synonymous with the way EquityZen has tried to do business over the last 12 years.
And so as part of this deal, will that mean that Morgan Stanley customers have access to these private companies via EquityZen? Does that also mean that people outside of the Morgan Stanley ecosystem will not?
Actually, what we want to try and do is have EquityZen and Morgan Stanley really, join together. Morgan Stanley has this fantastic vision of an integrated firm. And I'll tell you just, really quickly why that was really appealing for EquityZen when we were trying to figure out, well, what is the right way for us to expand our distribution at a global level? Morgan Stanley has an investment bank. It has capital market syndication desks. It also, of course, has asset management arms and wealth management arm. And I think when you kind of take the whole firm together, what a private market solution can provide and what EquityZen specifically can bring to the table is connectivity to the self-directed user that Morgan Stanley has with E*TRADE, to the issuer client that Morgan Stanley has with Morgan Stanley at Work and with its Solium ShareWorks platform and the equity plan services, and also with the liquidity provision that Morgan Stanley already offers as part of their tender offer business. And so you kind of have the demand that Morgan Stanley already has at a world-class level. You have the supply and the issuer relationships that Morgan Stanley has at a world-class level. And the gap that EquityZen is really bridging for them together is the ability to connect the supply with the demand in a way that the issuers are actually really thrilled about.
Atish, I have a bigger picture question for you, which is with this increase in accessibility for investment in private companies that, it seems like people are clamoring for. Of course, there are differences between private and public companies, and one of the most important is that you don't have the transparency in those private companies as investments. Is there a way to solve for that? Do you think there will be some level of increased transparency going forward as these investments increase? Look,
as companies start getting bigger and bigger while still staying private, OpenAI is a great example of this. You currently have a large private company that has recently had a lot of equity research get initiated on it. So I think, I think the question used to be, will there be regulation that forces issuers to disclose more even while they're private companies? And I think what we're seeing is the market is answering that question. Companies want to educate the market more. Companies want to educate its client base more. And by virtue of doing that, you have conversations like the equity market coverage that is beginning to initiate on private companies. And I think that's going to keep going. But the important thing, however, is that the companies need to have control over it. I mean, EquityZen's platform has been built on the premise that the issuer has to have a seat at the table. It's an issuer-approved platform. It's actually why Morgan Stanley and EquityZen, we think, made such a fantastic match, because the issuer really is at the center of the entire ecosystem. And just really quickly, Atish, do you think that there will be fewer companies going public still as a result of all of this? I think that more companies that are private will continue to stay private longer. I'm not saying IPOs won't come back, but I think if you compare the proportion of companies that are public versus private, I do think the private pool will continue to grow more. If you just take a look at the market cap of private companies, you're talking about it being in the trillions now. That used to not really be the case even as recently as 10 years ago. EquityZen's a 12-year-old platform, and we are very excited and fortunate to be able to take our know-how and learning and really catapult it onto the global scale and the institutional level that Morgan Stanley operates on.